Provost for Academic Affairs and Professor of Linguistics, Sarah Queen-Hammond, Mr. Richard Boyum, Professor Leslie of Beckman, Associate Professor Naraphon, Associate Professor Suchada, distinguished guests, members of the press, and participants. Today, I am very pleased to join this event, which brings about a memorable time I spent at the University of Oregon in Eugene last August. It is amid warm and friendly atmosphere when I met the executive administrators of the university, Mr. John Mosley, Vice Provost for Academic Affairs and Professor of Linguistics, Dr. Russ Tomlin, who will appear on the screen and give us a closing remark at the end of today's presentation, Mr. Alan Price, the Vice Chairman of the University, Mr. Jeff Makoto, the Director of Yamada Language Center, Mrs. Krista Hansen, the Director of the American English Institute, and especially Mrs. Leslie of Beckman, who will deliver a lecture to us. The 10-lecture series provided by University of Oregon with support of U.S. Embassy in Bangkok is the first experience of Distance Learning Foundation and University of Oregon in opening the door of international education to the Southeast Asia region and responds to the professional need of the regional teacher and educationist. Such constructive role, which I really appreciate. We give my warmest regards to Mayor of Eugene, Mr. Jim Torre, and Mayor of Springfield, Mr. Sid Ligon, the two gentlemen whom I met and share valuable moments together in Eugene. My sincere thanks also to Mr. Richard Boyum, Regional English Officer, the Embassy of the United States of America in Bangkok, for his support of this video conference lecture series program and dedication to professional development of English teacher in Thailand. Thank you.
Would you like us to proceed?
Leslie, from your side? Yes, please.
Yes. It gives me great pleasure to introduce from University of Oregon, Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, Professor Russ Tomlin. He's going to make some remarks on behalf of the University of Oregon.
Thank you, Leslie. Several weeks ago, we had a lovely experience at the University of Oregon when the Thai Student Association presented a Thai cultural night that I had the wonderful opportunity to be a part of. And at that opportunity, they tried to teach me a greeting in Thai, which I will risk, even though it will be done poorly, of saying Sawadi Krap, and express my own appreciation to colleagues in this conference, and some remarks on behalf of colleagues here at the University of Oregon. First, I'd like to say that I'd like to welcome everyone to this conference on behalf of the President of the University of Oregon, Professor David Frohnmeyer, as well as the Provost of the University of Oregon, Professor John Mosley. I also speak on behalf of the entire faculty of our appreciation and warm regard for the opportunity created by the Royal Distance Education Foundation and our colleague there, Chairman Kwanko. We are inspired by his leadership, inspired by the direction he's taken in international education, and we will strive to do our best to meet the spirit that the Royal Distance Education Foundation has created for all of us. I'd also like to welcome and acknowledge our Thai TESOL colleagues who will play a central role in the series over the next 10 lectures that will be coming, and also to my colleagues from the U.S. Embassy who have played a key role in setting all of this up. Finally, I'd also like to welcome all of the participants in this series. It's very strange sitting here in front of a television camera and I can't see all the participants in this series so easily in the little small box to work with. But I am most delighted to have the chance to welcome you to the conference series on behalf of the faculty of the University of Oregon and our administration as well. When I think about international education and think about what we are striving to do in a setting like this, the first thing that I think of are all the wonderful instrumental reasons to be involved in education. Improvement of our students' job prospects, improvements of our economic base and opportunities there, improvements of our ability to talk to one another in easy and hard diplomatic settings and business settings and academic settings. And all of that is, of course, extremely important to our enterprise and certainly one of our fundamental goals in our international efforts. But I think there's actually something more important that all of us involved in this enterprise must keep in mind on a daily basis. And that is that when we look at our students and we look at our colleagues who are also active in the creation of these opportunities, what we should really keep in mind is that we're talking about the dreams that our students have, the dreams that we have as educators, the dreams that our colleagues and our university presidents and our senior administrators throughout all of our university systems. Those dreams are actually more important than just job training and just such opportunities. The work that we do here and the work that we do as professionals in English language education helps open the doors for all of our students in mutual exchange to pursue dreams worthy of us as citizens in this world, in this global community, in this wonderful world we're all a part of. I take inspiration personally from the efforts of our colleagues here, Leslie Ott-Beckman, Sarah Klinghammer, many other people here, and I take inspiration from my colleagues, my new colleagues that I've met when Chairman Kwankyo and his associates visited us in Oregon. And I look forward to a future, all of us together, looking for new, innovative ways to bring us together in this small world. And I wish all of the participants and all of the faculty involved the best experience possible, the best of luck, and I thank you for listening to me for these few minutes as I welcome you on behalf of the University of Oregon to this wonderful video conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think it's back to you, Richard.
Yes, thank you. It's Richard Boyum, Regional English Language Officer in the American Embassy, Huancao, Oregon. It's really a pleasure to initiate this program series. It's been a dream of many of us, the distance learning, the Thai TESOL, our teachers, to utilize this amazing and wonderful system of distance learning for some teacher professional development as well as for classroom student education. So this series will initiate what we hope is a new era in teacher professional development, not only for Thailand but Southeast Asia. And we hope that we have participants in Laos and in Vietnam today, and welcome to you as well. We have active sites in Hua Hin and Bangkok, and we'll find out later how many other sites of the 5,000 schools that are equipped are actually participating this morning. So with that, I think I just want to again thank everyone for all the hard work that's gone into preparing this, and to our, again, Thai TESOL colleagues who are leading the charge in professional development in Thailand. And let's begin the program. Go back to Oregon.
All right, thank you very much, Richard. Here at University of Oregon, we've had a lot of thank yous and welcomes. If I could just add another brief one, I'd like to express my personal thanks to Richard Boyum, and to the Distance Learning Foundation Chairman Kwan Kao, and to my friends Naraporn and Kun Suchada. And thank you very much for all the effort that went into setting this up. It entails many, many hours and weeks of very detailed planning, and we're excited to be here today kicking off this 10-part lecture series. With us here today, we have my friend and longtime friend and colleague, Dr. Sarah Klinghammer from the Linguistics Department. She's the director of the MA program here in the Language Teaching Specialization, and she lives and breathes innovative language teaching methods. So she's here with us today to talk a little bit about some of those methods in the United States and how they might apply to secondary level classrooms in Thailand. So Sarah and I are going to work together a little bit here.
Yep. Okay. Again, let me express my greetings. Hello from the University of Oregon. I'm glad that I'm going to be able to see you at least part of the time when I'm talking to you. And we'd like to check in every now and again and see whether you're hearing us, whether you're understanding us. I hope it's not too early for you over there. It's 4 o'clock here, no, about 5 o'clock here. So it's a little late for us and a little early for you. Leslie is both an ESL teacher and a technology specialist, so she will be working to make things operate smoothly for us here.
We hope.
We hope. Thank you, Leslie. Okay. Today our topic is innovative approaches for communicative English language teaching. And let's start with a question. This is pretty basic, but what is communicative language teaching, or CLT? When we first started hearing about CLT in the 1970s, if you can believe, it was quite a limited approach. It was based on the idea of communicative competence. A learner learned language by using real language to do tasks, and the tasks were real tasks, we hoped. One of the teacher's roles was to give students information about language as they needed it to complete the task. Well, CLT still has those ideas, of course. But now, communicative language teaching has become a much broader idea. Communicative has become an umbrella term. That means a word that covers many different ideas and approaches under this umbrella. So let's start off by asking, what does communicative mean to you? We'd like you to take 3 minutes to talk about this question with some people sitting around you. First, introduce yourselves if you don't know the people sitting near you. Then make a list of 3 to 5 words or phrases that you think of when you hear the word communicative.
Okay, so this is their first mini task.
First mini task.
First mini task. We're going to give you 3 of them today. So we'll pause on our side, and if Naraparn wants to do her brief translation at this point, we cannot see any of the participants, so we'll need to let you tell us when you finish your translation and then they've had their 3 minutes to talk. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Leslie. ตอนนี้ก็เป็นมินิทัสนะคะคือให้อาจารย์แนะนำตัวกันเองนิดนึงแล้วก็ลองคิดดูซิว่าถ้าพูดถึง Communicative Language Teaching เนี่ยนะคะอาจารย์นึกถึงอะไรนะคะสัก 2-3 อย่างนะคะว่าอาจารย์ได้ทำอะไรเวลาอาจารย์สอนแล้วก็ในลักษณะที่เป็น Communicative Language Teaching นะคะเชิญค่ะสัก 2-3 นาทีค่ะจับคู่กันเลยนะคะอาจารย์อาจจะหันหลังไปที่อีกโต๊ะหนึ่งข้างหลังอาจารย์นะคะ
There they go. They switched. She was in a karate training. Give her a cake. They're recording on that TV. We were keeping the time, right? 30 seconds. We actually began. This is a very good room for a seminar. It looks very good on TV. Yeah. No, it's good room. A nice group.
Okay. Another 30 seconds.
Turn this back on. Okay, did everyone have a chance to talk?
Yes.
Great. We can see both of the classrooms. That's really helpful, so we can tell what people are doing. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Now that you've had time to write down a few words or phrases, just keep these lists, and perhaps you can compare them after the session. As you may see, if you compare your lists, there can be many different ideas about exactly what communicative means. When we think about communicative language teaching now, we know that it's just not one method that is always the same everywhere. Instead of just one method, it is an approach to language teaching, an approach that uses the idea of principles. To be considered communicative, language teaching must follow these principles. In 45 minutes, we don't have time to talk about all the principles in CLT, but we'd like to look at 5 of them. Leslie and I made up our lists, like you made up your lists, and our lists turned out to be mostly principles, so that's why we decided to talk about this. So, what's on your list, Leslie?
Well, the first one that I thought of was cooperative learning. That idea that learners can help each other learn the language and communicate with each other to complete tasks or do activities. So if we can, right now on our screen we see the lovely Mr. Richard Boyam and Chairman Kwan Kao and Kun Manaporn and Kun Suchata. But do you think we could see one or both of the classroom sites? Because we have a couple quick questions for the participants. We're going to ask them to raise their hands. We'd like to see their hands.
ขอภาพที่ผู้เข้าค่ะผู้เข้าร่วม
Working on it. There we go.
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. Can you raise your hand or say hello so we know that you're listening?
ยกมือได้ไหมคะยกมือ
All right. Hi, everybody. All right. Nice smiling faces. Okay, so we're talking a little bit here about principles, and we talked a little bit just about one of the first ones that we thought of, which was cooperative learning. So how many people in the room here, when you wrote your list down, when you wrote your 5 things down, raise your hand if you wrote down something about cooperative learning. That could be group work, students learning from each other, students cooperating together. Raise your hand. How many people put that on your list?
มีใครเขียน
Well, maybe they're still writing their lists. How about in this room?
มีใครเขียนเกี่ยวกับ
If you look down at your
learning
list,
ไหมคะ
No.
ค่ะเมื่อกี้ที่อาจารย์คุยกันได้มีใครค่ะมีพูดถึง comprehensive learning yes Leslie that's one there
all right.
Yeah, it's nice.
All right, I see some hands.
What we see on-
Very nice. Okay. Are we ready for the second principle?
Pair work, communicate games,
Okay.
role play. I think.
Thank you. Okay, so the first principle that we thought of, and that obviously some of you thought of as well, was this notion of cooperative learning. Another one that Sarah and I both thought of is the principle of content, or the notion of content. For learners to really communicate, they must have something real to talk about. This notion in communicative language teaching that we talk about things that are real, things that are meaningful to each other. This could be an actual situation, but in schools it also often means academic content. Did anyone at either of the sites, how many people wrote down something to do with content, or maybe authentic language, or real communication? Can you raise your hands if that was on your list? Raise your hand for us.
มีไหมคะที่เขียนถึงreal language content มีไหมคะค่ะค่ะ
เขาไม่เห็นเรามั้งตรงไหนเอ่ย
อือหือ
มือไม่เห็น โอเค
ยกมือ
See
ยกมือ
me?
ก่อน
real language กับ situation
ไม่เห็นมือเราแปลว่ามือเราเลย
เดี๋ยวค่ะ
ไม่เห็นมือเรา
Okay, there we see some hands. Great. So we are thinking along the same lines a bit. That's a good
Yeah.
sign. All right,
That's a
Sarah.
good sign. Okay?
ไม่เห็นไม่เห็น
So some of
เห็นกรุงเทพ
your words are the same as ours, and that's good.
ใจเห็นไหมเห็นไหมใจยกสิใจยกก็เห็นใจใจยก
Hua Hin would like to say something. Can you hear us from Hua Hin? Somebody would like to
Yes.
ask the questions. Yes. Okay.
Okay?
Please.
Okay. I'm Rujila from Wangrai Kangun School. When we hear the word communicative, I always think about the conversation.
Right. And certainly conversation is one aspect of communication. It's important to remember that communication also includes writing your ideas to people, reading other people's ideas.
Yeah.
So communicative includes all the skills, really. Does that answer your question?
Yes, okay. All right, so what other principles did you have in mind, Sarah?
Okay, the next principle, which is related to content, is function. What are speakers using language for? For example, are they using it to make social conversation? Are they using it to learn science? Are they using it to use the internet? Our students may have different reasons for learning language. And of course, maybe they have no reason at all. Maybe they don't want to learn language, and they're just sitting in class. And so then we get into the principle of motivation. But the fourth principle we want to talk about today is strategies. Students learn in different ways, using different learning strategies. One student may learn better with a lot of rules. Another student may learn better with a lot of pictures. A CLT teacher must think about different techniques in a class, using different strategies, learning teaching strategies to help students learn more easily, and to keep them motivated also. So did anyone write down either of these ideas? The purposes for which students learn language or learning strategies? Did anyone write those down? Raise your hand for those also.
มีไหมคะใครที่นึกถึง purpose กับ strategies
Nobody for strategies, maybe.
I think so.
How about
มีไหม
function?
คะยกมือค่ะ
The use for language.
Yes.
ใครย
Function.
กมือเฉยๆก็ได้ค่ะค่ะ yes
A couple of people?
Got some function ones.
Good, great, great, terrific.
yeah
Okay, so on this notion of strategies, Sarah, is there a place for focusing particularly on pieces of language? So we had one participant mention conversation.
Right.
What about things like grammar and vocabulary in a communicative approach?
Yeah, I think it's a good question because a lot of people think that if you're using pure communicative approach, there's no room for grammar or there's no room for vocabulary. But that's actually not true. There is a place, this is in communicative language teaching for this, and it is a linguistic principle. This particular one is what we call focus on form. And I'm sure some of you have heard that before many times. Effective language teaching also includes a focus on form. This is to help students become more accurate in their communication. Now, this doesn't mean that teachers teach only grammar or only vocabulary. But grammar and vocabulary are a very important part of classroom practice. And this is the part that forms the support for the important communicative activities that students participate in or that students do. So when we talk about innovative approaches, we have to think about principles. How can we design our teaching around principles? And why is this important to you as school teachers in Thailand? We believe that it's important because teachers need to be able to make their teaching fit their situation. One particular method might not work very well in your situation. However, you can use a set of principles to choose procedures and techniques that would be communicative and still fit your situation and your students. In order to do that, though, the teacher needs to be able to analyze the situation. For example, who are your students? Why are they learning English? What kind of language do they need? What is your school like? What is possible in your school situation? We're going to stop again here, take another 3 minutes, and ask you to write or maybe just talk about a description of your students. This description is one part of understanding or analyzing your situation. So how would you describe your students? Think about age, gender, language level, socioeconomic level, number of students in your class, what they need English for, any of those descriptors. Go ahead.
And maybe what we can do on our side is put up a list of what some of those
Okay.
things might be.
Let's do that.
ค่ะขอกรุ๊ปเวิร์กอีกทีนะคะ ตอนนี้ขอตัดภาพไปที่หัวหินนะคะ ลองลิสต์ดูว่ามีในเวลาที่เราดูเราจะ describe ผู้เรียนของเราอย่างไรนะคะ ทั้งอายุเพศระดับความสามารถพื้นฐานภาษาอังกฤษ แล้วก็รวมทั้งจำนวนนักเรียนในห้องของเราด้วยความสนใจของนักเรียนความต้องการของนักเรียนนะคะลองลิสต์ทางกรุงเทพด้วยนะคะค่ะ3 นาทีค่ะ
To turn to the people behind them, make little groups. Make little groups of them. They could try and make a group of 4 and so. Anyway, for the next one, try to have them behind. Oh, there they go. That's it. Akira. Here and I moved, could you get shot past me, Quencao, to show the picture from the camera? Like maybe just from this corner? Try to get a picture. With all of this right here. Right, try right. The same with Ajahn from the corner there.
Yeah. I think we've already got 3 minutes here. Over to Leslie.
Okay. So I hope everybody has gotten down some ideas about what your students are like. Analyzing your situation, you might follow this same procedure to figure out what's possible in your classrooms, describing your school, describing the people involved in your school. But for now, just keep this description of your students in mind as you listen to two examples of what other teachers are doing in classrooms like yours. Listen for ideas that might work for you. And listen for ideas that you might be able to adapt or change so that they could work for you. The first example that we are going to talk about is what's happening in U.S. public schools today. What is happening is that schools are working together with ESL professionals and textbook publishers to create content-based textbooks, series that combine many of the communicative principles to teach content through the 4 language skill areas: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Most of these series also contain grammar, vocabulary, phonics, and spelling. We're going to walk you through one unit in one text. These materials, you will see, try to combine what has been learned about language learning and teaching over the past 30 years or more into one package where all of the elements of the unit support each other, and therefore they support the student's learning. So let's look at this one textbook. The series is called Shining Star.
Sarah and I are going to change places here so she can be closer to the book. While we're doing that, we both want to say that we have no personal connection to this book. We don't necessarily like it any better than any others. It's just one example. So we're not saying this is the book or this is the way. This is just one example of how this packaging and blending of communicative principles has been done. After we do this, we're going to talk about ways you can do this without buying a book, on your own, in your own classrooms as well.
Okay. This particular unit is called Observing the Universe. And the first part is based on a science reading. The second part is based on a literary reading. So if you look here, you'll notice first they do background to the reading. Notice they talk about vocabulary and use a diagram to explain the vocabulary, so it's more graphic and easier to see. They also include a reading strategy. So if you think about the topic is orbiting the Earth, or the Earth's orbit. When you talk about the Earth's orbit, what is a very useful kind of reading material to use? Diagrams. So the reading strategy they focus on is how to read diagrams. Notice, as we go through this book, there's a diagram on each page. Everything is very colorful. I hope you can see some of this. I'm putting it there. Here shows where the axis is. Again, diagrams with vocabulary written on it. Here they're talking about the different seasons. Oh, let's see, how can I fit here?
The camera, the broadcast needs to be Oregon, not us.
There we are. talking about what the Earth looks like in June, in December.
Okay, there she is. Tell her to keep it on.
So the next step then is a literary one. What are some myths about the seasons? So there's a myth, a Native American myth, and there's a Greek myth. And the background for these readings is talking about who the Greeks were and when this culture existed, who the Native Americans were, where they were. There are many different pieces to this unit, but I'm going to skip now and just show you a few of them. On the myths, there is a writing assignment at the end of this particular unit. Can we see this?
I think you'll do better with the handout.
Let's use the handout. That might work better.
You expanded the handout, yeah.
Is that?
You'll have to, I'll take this.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Notice? You can. Okay, good. Notice that the task is for students to read the myth again and then make a story chart. There are 4 pieces to the story chart. Characters, setting, and this means the time of the story and the place of the story. And so students write down this information. The next one, problem or conflict. So students write down the conflict in the myth. What is their problem? Then the next box is solutions. How did they solve their problem? After the learners fill out this story chart, they use a new story chart and create a story chart for their own myth. For example, maybe it's a myth that they know about, or maybe it's one from their own imagination. It doesn't matter, but they make out this story chart, and that helps them create a writing the writing assignment, which is writing their own story. Going back to the book, we can look at another piece in the book. In part 2, as I said, it is let's see if I can get this story here. Okay. This is another myth, only this time it's written as a play. So they do 5 key words before they start. Then they listen to the play on tape. Then each student takes a different character in the story, and in separate groups, they read through the play together in groups at the same time. The teacher walks around and listens to their pronunciation and helps them with words they can't pronounce. There is a comprehension exercise for this particular play that I think is very interesting. Comprehension does not have to be just questions. If you look at this chart, the first column in the chart is the characters. The second column in the chart. Let's see if I can place it on here. There we go. Each of the characters in this particular play had a special skill. So after each character, the students write the skill they had. Then, in the last box, they ask the question, how did the characters help others in the group? Excuse me. And so here, each character, they write down what each character does to help the other people in the group. It's a very interesting comprehension lesson, and students have to be able to understand the story in order to fill out the chart. The very last the last story in this book is not a story. It's the last reading, I should say, returns back to science. This one talks about how to build a telescope. At the end of the unit, they have a section called Putting It All Together. In this section, they take the different things that they've been working on and learning in the unit and try to do something more spontaneous. So they might do a listening speaking activity where the students do a play in front of the class. Each group does their own play. Another activity they talked about that was very interesting to me was a writing assignment. The teacher puts big pieces of paper on the walls of the classroom. Students in groups, maybe 2 or 3, use the paper. First, they imagine they are the sun, or they are on the sun. And they are supposed to think about, if they were the sun, what would they see on Earth? What would they see happening on Earth? Then they take turns drawing a picture of something they see happening on Earth. And then use that picture to write a story about something they see from the sun that is happening on Earth. Anyway, thinking about what I've just pointed out to you, look at the 5 communicative principles again: cooperative learning, content, function, strategies, and focus on form. We're going to ask you to take 3 minutes again, and I'm going to try to put this up here so you can use it as your guideline. Okay, there we go. Where did you see these? Did you see these principles in some of the pieces of the unit that we talked about just now? And if so, where? What did they do in this unit that showed they were following one or more of these 5 principles? Again, take 5 minutes and talk about that.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. ขอภาพกลับมาที่กรุงเทพนะคะ ขอท่านอาจารย์ทำงานกลุ่มอีกครั้งนะคะ We will have group work again and we have 5 minutes. อาจารย์ซาร่าให้เรากลับไปดู principles 5 principles เมื่อกี้นี้นะคะแล้วก็ลองดูซิว่าบทเรียนที่อาจารย์ให้ดูเป็นตัวอย่างนะคะที่เป็น shining star เมื่อกี้นี้ในบทนั้นนะคะ observing the universe เนี่ยมีส่วนไหนของบทเรียนบ้างที่ตรงกับ principles ที่เราได้เห็นนะคะที่อาจารย์ได้บรรยายไว้ครั้งแรก5 principles นั่นน่ะมีกิจกรรมไหนที่สนองต่อ principle ไหนนะคะอาจารย์ได้โน้ตไว้เห็นอาจารย์โน้ตเพราะฉะนั้นอาจารย์ลองดูนิดนึง discuss กันนะคะให้เวลา5 นาทีค่ะเชิญค่ะทางหัวหินด้วยนะคะขอความกรุณาอาจารย์เป็นกลุ่มนะคะแล้วก็อาจารย์ได้เห็นตัวอย่างบทเรียนที่อาจารย์ซาร่าให้เมื่อกี้แล้วนะคะลองดูว่ากิจกรรมไหนตรงกับหลักการ principle อันไหนทั้ง5หลักการที่เขาให้ขึ้นดูบนสกรีนเมื่อกี้ค่ะ
ค่ะเดี๋ยวทางหัวหินนะคะลองดูว่าบทเรียนที่เมื่อกี้เรื่อง Shining Star เนี่ยจะ apply กับ principle ไหน5ข้อที่ได้อาจารย์ซาร่าได้อธิบายมานะคะก็ขอให้แยกกันแล้วก็ทำงานเป็นกลุ่มนะคะประมาณ3 นาทีนะคะขอบคุณค่ะ
ขอทวนนิดนะคะทราบว่าบางท่านไม่ได้จด principles ไว้ข้อ1คือ cooperative learning นะคะ2คือ content 3คือ function หรือว่า purpose นะคะ4คือ strategies 5ก็คือ focus on form ค่ะ formค่ะ
Comprehensive learning มี form มี function มี strategy แล้วก็focus on form
someday. And I will go
cooperative learning content
see if they watched, recorded. And then for the next one, I'll organize, make sure they have a group and they can watch it. Maybe fax or telephone or something. Well, uses Distance Learning Foundation. I saw them. They record everything, translate into Vietnamese, give to their students. I thought that was fantastic.
Okay, are we ready to come back together?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, we're ready.
Excellent. What we're going to do, we're running not real short on time, but we want to be sure that we have enough time to cover our second example. What we'd like is for each of the sites to give us one example of each of the principles. So we looked at the unit, Observing the Universe. Could you give us an example of what you saw in terms of cooperative learning? And Hua Hin, could you give us an example of what you saw in terms of the principle of content?
Okay. We start in Bangkok first, right? อาจารย์มานิ
Thank
สา
you.
ช่วยถือไมโครโฟนด้วยนะคะ Cooperative Learning ค่ะยกมือด้วยค่ะ มีใครที่ค่ะ เชิญค่ะ ขอภาพอาจารย์ด้วยนะคะ
Is it on? Is the mic on?
ไม่เปิด
Not on.
For cooperative learning, and in my class, I think that if you let the students work together and try to think about how they think together, they will help each other, even they are weak or strong. The strong students can help the weak student, and they can share idea.
And so which activity in the
In this?
In this one.
In this one, they find out, they make the chart, the character charts by themselves, help each other by putting in the part like character setting and what else, solution like that. And they help writing comprehension exercise together by making them make it, if they know the real story or not, they can imagine by themselves like that.
Okay. Thank you. Leslie?
Okay, good. Very good. Thank you. That's an excellent example of cooperative work. Okay. How about from Hua Hin? Can you give us some comment on the content from the analysis of Observing the Universe?
หัวหินค่ะ
พูดได้เลยพูดได้เลย I think it's about the science, the general knowledge, the weather, and the real life. Thank you.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
so it's a good example of the principle of teaching two things at the same time, working on both the language or the linguistic principles and the content area of science, and also literature at the same time. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting how they went from the science reading to the two myths, which were about the seasons. The Native American myth was about summer, how summer came about, and the Greek myth was about how spring came about. So it's interesting that they're using science and literature almost to support each other on this particular topic. This is the kind of thing. We don't all have books like this. We don't here in our classes at the university. But I think that the ideas that are there in this book, the idea of combining all of the elements that one can think of in a communicative approach to teaching and learning, is what this example is why we chose this example to use to show to you. The second example, however, we're going to look at a particular classroom approach. This is called Total Physical Response Storytelling, or TPRS. You've probably heard of TPR, right? I'm sure that many of you have heard of TPR. TPRS is based on TPR, but it carries it further. It carries it into a more organized procedure that covers all of the all of the language skills. And there are three reasons why we chose this particular approach, or innovative approach, to talk with you about. One, you can use this approach with your regular classroom textbook. Two, there's a very strong vocabulary focus. And three, you can find background reading and information about this approach accessible online.
Freely.
Freely.
Yes, you don't have
free.
to pay anything for it, so that's a good thing.
And actually, there's a fourth one in that this is used in high schools in the United States. So let's look at the steps in TPR. Leslie and I are going to use one of the stories that you can find online. This is a story that is in one of the online websites that we will give you. And we're going to try to demonstrate a little bit from a couple of the steps in this approach. We're going to do steps 1 and 2. But you can find a more complete description on the website. The addresses for these 3 TPR sites are in your handout, and they are on the lecture website also. I've got to get what I'm using for this first part. In the first part, you use TPR to describe words. And in this case, I think there are 5 or 6 words. And I just asked Leslie to get my sack of demonstration materials here. I think it's important to realize that we as teachers don't have time to go out and get perfect materials, perfect realia for our students very often. So last night, I looked into my children's old toy boxes and came up with some things that I might use for this particular story. This story, and I don't know if you can see the items that I have here on the table. I hope you can see some of them. I'll put them a little closely. This story is about a coyote, and here is the coyote, and a bird, a little bird, and here is the bird. Now, you notice I didn't have a coyote, so I just took an old doll of my children and pasted a picture of a coyote that I got online on this particular object just because it's stable. The only bird I could find was on a bird mobile. And I didn't want to ruin the mobile, so I just brought the whole thing, and I'm showing you just using one little bird from the mobile. So we use TPR in order to teach the words from the story. TPRS is a little different because you add an action for each one of the words. So I'm going to ask you to do what I tell you to do and use the actions that I use. This is TPR. All right, here we go. Eat. Eat. Everybody, eat. Come on.
Let's see some eating,
Let's
folks.
see some eating.
You must be hungry. It's early in the morning.
Everybody eat. Okay, very good, good. All right. Eat 4 ice cream cones. Eat ice cream cones. Very good. We're going
Very
to eat
hungry.
4 of them. 4 of them. Okay, eat your ice cream. Oh, yum. That's good.
Yum, yum.
Oh, 4 of them. After 4 of them, ugh, yuck. Not so good. Everybody, eat a sandwich. A sandwich. Very good. Some people are eating sandwiches. Good. Eat a sandwich. Eat a small bird.
Ew.
Oh. Eat a small bird.
Can't do it.
Can't do it. Okay. Small bird.
Pretend you're a cat.
You're a small bird. Eat. Eat. Okay, everybody do eat. Eat a small bird. Okay, be the small bird. Very good, very good. Eat. Eat. Everybody eat a small bird and a big coyote. And a big coyote. Ah, good. Big, ugly coyotes.
I don't think they have coyotes in
I don't
Thailand.
think so. I don't
yeah,
think
we
so.
have them in Oregon, but it's wild dogs. It's like big wild dogs.
So I don't know if you can see this picture, but it's if you can't, we'll have it on the overhead a little bit later. It's a picture of a coyote. Okay. Now, a new gesture. Here's the bird. See, a small bird. See. Everybody see. See a small bird. I don't see. Are you seeing?
See a small
See.
bird.
They're sleepy still. They're not seeing.
See a small bird. Okay. See
See
a small bird.
a small bird.
Good, good, good. See
Yay.
a small bird. Okay. You want to eat the bird. You want to eat the bird. Okay. Now, grab the coyote. Grab.
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 Grab, like this.
Everybody grab.
Grab.
Grab the coyote.
Let's see you grabbing. Grab.
Okay, grab. Grab the coyote. Good. Offer it to the student on your left.
Oh, a coyote. Thank you, Sarah.
Offer it to the student on your left. Very good. Okay. Now offer the student a big bird. A big bird. I don't see any big birds.
Big bird.
Big bird. Big bird. Big bird. Little bird. Little bird.
Little bird.
Little bird. Good. Here's a big bird.
Yeah.
And a little bird. Very good. Okay. Offer the student a big bird. A big bird. Oh,
it's so
heavy.
heavy.
Okay.
Maybe it's
Now-
a Thanksgiving bird.
A Thanksgiving bird.
Yeah.
Now, grab a coyote and put it on the student's head. Okay? Grab a coyote, put it on the student's head. Very good, very good. Okay. So, and you continue like this, practicing the words with and teaching the little bird, the coyote, eat, wants to eat, and what was another one?
Grab.
Grab,
Yeah.
grab,
Grab.
and offer.
Offer. Yes, offer.
Okay? Those are the words that you need for this little mini story. After you've practiced the words, then the students can be the bird and the coyote. So some students are the little bird, and some students are the coyote. And we practice the words, and they practice the gestures, and they act out a little bit. Okay, step 2. I'm going to put this paper over here. In step 2, the students practice and produce the new words in pairs. So first we read, act out, and then say the words. So Leslie and I are going to be a pair and show you how this works. So Leslie, you read the words.
All right, Sarah, are you ready?
Oh, yes.
All right. Number 1, small bird. All right, good. Coyote. Very good. All right. Big bird. Okay. How about sees? Grabs. Sees. Oh, very good. Oh, she's sharp. I couldn't trick her. She's very sharp. How about grabs? Offers. Oh, in Thai style, too. Very nicely done. All right.
Now you do it. Small bird. Big bird. Big bird. Oh, big bird. Wants to eat. Yeah. Grabs. Offers. Very good. Coyote. Okay. All right.
We both pass. I think we both pass.
We're very good learners. All right? The next step, after you do it with just reading the word and acting out, then one student acts out, the other student says the word. All right? So,
Okay. Bird. Coyote.
coyote.
Coyote. Coyote. Bird. Little bird. Okay. Big bird. Sees. Take. Grab. Grabs. Offer. Hungry. Eat. Wants to eat. Wants to eat.
Okay?
Okay. Oh, it's my turn. Okay. Helper.
Help.
Helper. What is it?
Coyote.
Coyote. Very good. Very good. All right.
Little bird. Big bird. Grabs. Gives. Offers. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So that's step 2, and you practice, then the students practice the words back and forth, different ways, using the gestures. And then in step 3, the teacher uses pictures or puppets or items like this to tell the story. We're going to use pictures. So, if you can see this,
Let me get it a little larger for you.
okay? There are only 4 pictures. This is the first picture.
There you go. Good. That's real good.
There is a big coyote. There is also a tiny bird. The coyote sees the tiny bird. The coyote wants to, eat the bird. The coyote wants to eat the bird. The coyote grabs the bird. Oh no! But the bird is a very smart bird, no. But the bird offers the coyote a peanut butter sandwich. What a relief. Okay? So the teacher tells this story, and then she uses a variety. She tells the story several times, over and over, so the students hear it many times. And gradually the students start contributing more and more to the story. And they use the cues if necessary. So if we go back to the first picture of the coyote, I will say, maybe the next time I tell the story, I'll say, there is a big
Coyote.
Coyote. We're from the American West. In the American West, you say coyote, but the proper pronunciation is coyote.
Sarah, are you correcting my English?
I am correcting your English. There is also a tiny bird. The coyote sees the bird. Okay, so you get an idea how this works. Then the students combine different parts of the story. Then students tell the story to each other, using the pictures first, and then without the pictures. Then student volunteers, one student will tell the story, and another student will act it out. If you have a small class, you can do this in front of the class, but usually you do it in groups or in pairs, so that one student tells the story, the other student acts it out. After they've practiced doing this, the students can play with the story if they want to. For example, they might say, there was a big bird. There was also a small coyote. The bird sees the coyote. So you see what I mean? Students can play with it. Students that enjoy doing this will make up kind of funny variations on the stories in step 3. In step 4, there are several mini-stories. And after several mini-stories, there are several mini-stories like this one of the coyote and the bird. Then after maybe 3 or 4 of these little stories, the teacher will put all these little stories together in one main story, in a longer story that's a main story. And she will follow the same steps that they used for the mini-stories. For example, the students use the pictures, they retell the teacher tells the story first, then using pictures, the students use the pictures and retell the story to each other. The students act out the story in front of the room or in groups, whatever. Now, it could be that the mini-stories don't fit together exactly, in which case the teacher might make up another story that uses the same characters and vocabulary as the mini-stories. So again, the students can play with the story, can change it, can do it individually, can tell it in groups, they can act it out. Step 5 is the creative part. Students can act out their own stories, or they can act out this whole story. They can write the story, or they can write their own story. I should add that as you're going through these steps, the teacher, whenever she feels the need, can have the students write the story. So maybe in step 3, after the students have practiced orally, she will have them write the story in their notebooks. Maybe there's some grammar in the story that she thinks is important. She can stop during step 3 and add a focus on grammar. Then in step 5, there are all kinds of things students can do. This is where students try to be a little creative, a little more spontaneous in their use of language. They can write their own story. They can illustrate this story. One student can write a story and give it to another student who can illustrate it for them. They might videotape their acting out. All of these are done usually in groups or pairs where you have communication going on in the classroom. So TPRS is an active communicative approach to language teaching. You can use it with a story out of your own textbook. You can use it with pictures out of your own textbook. It can be used with older students. It can be used with younger students in large classes, small classes. Notice that it also included the 5 principles, or at least 4 of the principles we talked about. Cooperative learning, the students are working together all the time. Content, in this case it was a story, but sometimes the content might be how to make something, or the content might be describing something, talking about a scientific principle like the telescope that we talked about earlier. So the content can be a lot of different things. Function. What is the language being used for? It's being used to talk back and forth. It's being used to talk about the story, and then it's expanded to be used just to talk about this idea, this area in general.
This was a nice example of sequencing.
Yeah.
Sort of first and second, and then the final result is sort of a surprise in there as well.
Right, right. Yeah, it's excellent that way. So we suggest, and of course there's the focus on form. At any point, the teacher can stop and do an exercise, stop and have the students write, stop and look at some of the grammar in the story, and teachers do that. So we suggest that you look at the more detailed description of TPRS online on the websites that we've given you, and then try the following task. And this isn't something we're going to ask you to do now, but to do after you have looked over the websites and gotten a more detailed description of this procedure. Pick one of the units or topics from your book, preferably one with pictures. It's always easier that way. Then create an activity using TPRS based on that unit in your book. Follow the step-by-step procedure that you will find online. But then don't stop there. Then after developing the activity, think about it. Reflect on it. Ask yourself how many of the 5 principles we talked about guided your new activity. Then, when you're ready, try the activity in your class. Think ahead about how you will assess your students' work, and then share your experience with a colleague, hopefully somebody who is sitting here with you who has also tried this.
I have a question, Sarah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's say I haven't done this before, and I don't have a sense of how long it's going to take. So if I think about all those 5 steps, that was a lot of steps. And, maybe I only get to see my students for 45 minutes, a couple of times a week. How long should I plan to spend on this? And is there sort of a required amount of time for it?
No, I don't think so. The nice thing about a procedure like this is you don't have to do it all at once.
Fair enough.
And you can make the steps longer or shorter, depending on how much time you have. So maybe you want to work on the vocabulary on the first day.
Uh-huh.
You're working on your unit. so you'll want to do just the TPR the first day and do the vocabulary. Then maybe later on you want to do some kind of a short mini story that goes along with the reading in the book, but maybe a shorter version of the reading in the book to make it easier, that something the students can act out. So you can adjust this procedure and use it as you want to, depending on your own materials and what you want to do. So that's your task between now and the next one of these presentations. So this brings our first session to an end. We hope you've gotten some ideas about using innovative approaches in your classrooms. Remember, when you're talking about innovative approaches, what that means now is combining many different elements, many different ideas in language teaching and learning, combining them into something that is organized, where each of your activities supports the next activity, and all of them combine to make a whole unit that helps students learn.
And what I liked about what you talked about today, Sarah, is my package of principles, my set of principles that I choose doesn't have to be exactly the same as yours.
Exactly.
Right. So I might have a different size class. My students might have different needs or interests. I myself might have a different teaching style than you. So we talked about 5 principles today, but out of 10 or 15 of them, I might choose a slightly different set.
That's right.
It still means that I'm teaching in a communicative manner. It's not that I have to be a slave to any one approach or any one particular principle anymore.
Right.
But it's also not a free-for-all. It's this idea of using analysis and considering what you're doing and why you're doing it and which principles you're drawing from and how you're applying them. Is that fair?
That's exactly right. Yeah,
okay.
That's exactly right. And that's why I think thinking in terms of teaching with principles is exciting.
It is exciting, and I had fun with the storytelling. Except I want to be the coyote and you can be the bird.
Well, the bird gets eaten. Okay, so we'd be happy at this point to answer any questions that you might have.
How are we doing on time? I know we ran a little over, and I know you have some other things you may want to do too. What would you suggest at this point?
Yeah, I think, thank you very much, Oregon, for your presentation, for engaging everyone here. And I know you've got a couple discussion questions scoped out on the handout. I think we'd all plan maybe to go maximum up till 10, so there's a few minutes left. Maybe we can take questions from the group or go through your discussion questions if people are a little bit shy. It looks like Bangkok had someone raising their hand. Maybe we can get a microphone over to the teacher and hear a question. Go ahead, Bangkok.
How can I test these lessons, these kinds of lessons? How can I test these kinds of lessons?
How can you pace this kind of lesson?
Testing and evaluation. Test.
Oh, test. I beg your pardon.
Test.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
This kind. That's a very good question, because one question that people always wonder is, well, how do we test something like oral communication or a communicative task? My answer to that is that anything that you use as a task in your class, you can also use as a test later. So, for example, if you used one of the story charts that we talked about earlier, your test can be giving the students the same kind of reading, using the same vocabulary, and having them write a story chart based on that reading. The same way with a listening task. So if students are asked in class to act out a story, your test can be giving the students direction. One of the students gives directions, the other student acts it out. So that your testing, your assessment is very directly connected to the teaching. Do you have anything to add to that, Leslie?
No, I think that's really good, and I think one of the things I heard you saying is that if I give my students a reading and then I give them a story chart, when I'm testing them, I might not give them the same reading and the same story chart. I might give them a similar reading with similar level of difficulty and vocabulary I expect they already know. So the tasks are very similar, but they're not duplicates.
Right. Although in the test, you have to be very careful in the test that the vocabulary is the same. Because you don't want to test vocabulary they might not know.
Right.
So that's the only thing I would add to that. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yes, please. May I ask you a question? Will students using this kind of curriculum do well on standardized tests?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. The question was, can students who do use this kind of curriculum do well on standardized tests? And the answer to the question is, of course, students who do very well, students who learn to communicate using these techniques will probably do well on standardized tests. But that doesn't mean that the teacher can't help that process. So the teacher has to keep a balance in class, all right? So even though you might be doing some communicative activities, if the standardized testing is a very different kind of thing than what you're doing in class, you do need to be sure that your students have been given some of that same type of question, some of that same kind of format that they will get on the standardized test. They do need to have some practice with that. Would you agree?
I would agree. I think what we're talking about here are sort of two different things, but I liked your concept of balance. And so if I'm studying grammar, whether I'm studying a grammatical element in a communicative framework or as a drill, it's still grammar. What's different in a communicative element is that you hope the person can actually use that grammatical construction in a real communication later on. Whereas with a test, I think the kind of support that people need is how to take a test. So if you know that your standardized test has true, false, or multiple choice questions on them, you're certainly going to want to make sure they recognize those structures and know how to work with them. But it's not that you teach a different grammar for that, or you teach a different vocabulary. So I think you can have your cake and eat it too. Yes.
It's a little hard, and it takes a while, I think, to come up with that balance.
Let's ask.
Any other questions?
Let's ask Kun Sorada in Hua Hin.
Yes.
Did someone there have their hands
Yes.
up? Was there a
yes,
question?
I think so. They enjoyed themselves greatly with the little bird and grab and everything. And right now we have a few questions, Leslie and Dr. Sarah. Please.
Okay. So I would like to ask some questions.
Okay.
Okay. Where we can find materials to do this if we don't already have them?
Okay. I'll turn that over to you, Leslie.
Okay, so the question is, where can we find materials to do these kinds of things? So we gave you a few websites to look at for TPRS. There are a number of these websites out there. One of the things that we're going to do is put a list of extended resources on the supporting website for this lecture. By the way, all of the materials from the lecture, including the handout that you got, but also the script from Sarah's lecture, so the actual word by word of what she said, will be available later on, and a copy of this video. So after the lecture series, after each one of these 10 lectures, we will make available to you the handouts, the resources that we showed you, the script of the lecture, a copy of the video, and some extended resources. So some examples of the kinds of extended resources we might point you toward would be things like drama sites or Reader's Theater sites. Reader's Theater is a good match for this. Or if you would like to send us suggestions, we would be happy to take email from you. So for example, if you have a textbook that a lot of you are using and you have a couple of units that you're especially interested in. So we chose observing the universe, but you might have something to do with heroes or hobbies or business or something like that. We would be happy to put together a set of resources that would point you in those kinds of directions for content and linguistic principles, learning strategies, ideas for group work, that kind of thing. So we'd like this series, today is just the first one, we would like this series to be an ongoing give and take and communicative effort between Thailand and Oregon. And so if you can send us feedback and send us suggestions, we'll do our very best to incorporate that in the website and in future lectures as well.
Yeah, and I think I might add to that. We talk about websites because they're so accessible to so many people and there's so much on them. But at the same time, remember some of the traditional things,
That's true.
videos. And I know that in Thailand you can get a lot of videos.
Well, and their classrooms have television in them as well.
That's good.
And even your example of Realia here today, these are not things that you went out and bought.
Nope.
These are just everyday things around your home or, you know, in the environment or in the community. Yeah, I saw a really nice version of this TPRS where all the students brought in things from their gardens.
Oh.
They brought in leaves and sticks and things from nature. They were doing some sort of natural elements kinds of things. And they made up stories and they did all the pointing and the identifying and they had a lot of ownership over those articles because they brought them in themselves as well.
Yeah,
so you can get really creative with these approaches yourself and with the materials too.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes.
And please let us know if we're
Yeah,
not answering
maybe
your
one more
question.
question,
We have
Dr.
one in
Sarah.
Bangkok.
Okay, sure.
Two, actually.
Okay, thank you.
I think that...
Go ahead.
Hello.
And then the gentleman.
I think that the example that you showed me this morning is for the young student. Could you please give me another one for the older student, about 15 to 18 years old?
Okay, now are you talking about the coyote and the bird?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Another example for the
examples for older
student.
students.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me give you an example of one that I watched a colleague of mine do in the high school here in Eugene. This one was a story that was talking about an argument between a landlord and a renter. And the renter was making too much noise with a hammer. And so the interesting pieces of this story were that the renter went out to a hardware store. And when the teacher started giving the background for the story, she asked the students, "What's your favorite hardware store?" And so the students gave her the name of their favorite hardware store in Eugene. So she put that in the story. And then he was making a lot of racket, and somebody came in and told him to stop, and he wouldn't stop. And the landlord said, "Okay, if you're going to make noise, you have to pay me $50 extra every month." And that's the way the story ended. She makes up her own stories to fit her situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could apply this technique to almost anything. The sky is really the limit. I mean, you're describing an argument and a sort of problem solving and find a solution. Problem solving in general, I mean, whether it's related to things like first aid or procedural things. How many times have you bought something and you opened the box and it was in parts and you had to put it together? So how-to kinds of things even would work for this. Could be social situations. I've got a friend, my friend wants me to go to the movies, but I changed my mind. But I don't want to hurt my friend's feeling, and I want to go do something else with another friend. So they can be kind of teenage social dynamics as well. So acting out those things. You know, asking someone for a date if that's socially and culturally appropriate. A lot of this has to do with what's socially and cognitively and culturally appropriate for your own audiences, and I think that's Sarah's main point today is you're the best ones to decide that. I mean, you have to do this analysis of your own environment and your own students and look around you. What are their interests? What's going to get them excited? What kind of story are they going to have fun with and really get engaged in? And if you aren't really sure yourself, ask them. I bet they would tell you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, or do some kind of little survey or something, but make it engaging and interesting for them. You're absolutely right. If you go into a room full of 16-year-olds and you bring a little bird and a coyote, you know, you might not get them quite as excited. If you bring a hammer and an angry landlord, or you bring, you know, some kind of social drama to the scene, then probably you can get them going. Probably they'll get themselves going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, she also does another story where two boys in the high school are fighting about something. And so that was a pretty good story also.
Hopefully it had a happy ending.
It had an interesting ending.
An interesting ending. An ending with a twist. Maybe it had multiple endings.
Different possible endings. And then sometimes she does the stories and she has the students decide on the ending.
Oh, like vote.
Vote on the ending.
Vote. What's the best ending?
Yeah.
There you go. All right.
Okay, any other questions?
We're watching our time. We have two people have their hands raised in Bangkok. We'll take the last two questions from Bangkok. First, the young lady, then the gentleman, and then we'll be wrapping up.
Okay, thank you, Richard.
Miss, teacher Ajahn, go ahead.
Okay. As we know that Thai students are so shy, do you have an idea to encourage Thai students to create their story and read out the story? This is the number one. And then question two, what should the teacher do if the student use wrong grammar or wrong vocabulary? Do they have to correct them immediately or wait for later? Thank you.
Okay, those are two good questions. The first one, you're talking about the shy Thai students. If we're talking about TPRS, the nice thing about TPRS is that all of these steps, you have to train your students to do all of these steps. So even if the students are very shy, they have to do this. It's an expectation of the class.
Well, it starts small.
And it does start
really, really small. So I think part of it's sort of building up safety, a feeling of safety and confidence. And this error correction is closely tied to that. If I take a risk and make a mistake, are you going to sort of slap my hand and correct me right away? So,
exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, you notice that in these steps, first you do it in pairs together. Nobody's watching you. Maybe the teacher comes around. But when you're doing it in pairs is actually when the teacher might correct something like grammar. If she feels that it's serious enough that it needs to be corrected. And so because that would not be face losing for the student, because the student would be just with one other student and other students wouldn't hear this correction.
And my guess is it's kind of like what you're building toward. So if you're going through the whole TPRS process, you know, from the very, very early bird, coyote, or hammer part, all the way to the end of students writing their very own story. I mean, that's a lot of steps in a big process. You might wait to do some of this feedback, the more serious feedback, when they're in their writing phase, for example, and when you would have sort of very concrete things to look at. Or you might, if they're working in pairs and groups, go around and give quiet one-on-one correction.
Right, and that's exactly the way you do it. You just make sure it's not that you don't correct, it's that you're very careful how and where. I have never seen a TPRS teacher correct a student when they are acting something out in front of the whole class.
Oh, yeah, that would be
I've never ever seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And the last comment, question from Ajahn.
Yes. What are some strategies for dealing with difficult vocabulary?
Again?
What are some strategies for dealing with difficult vocabulary?
Oh, okay. You mean strategies for dealing with different things you can do when the vocabulary is more difficult than just talking about a coyote and a bird. A lot of vocabulary, of course, you can act out. But there's an awful lot of vocabulary, as we all know, that you cannot act out.
True.
It's abstract, or it doesn't fit in any kind of a paradigm. And there are different things that you can do. Of course, you teach dictionary skills. I mean, we all know that.
Especially with teenagers. Teenagers are, we're assuming that you're working with the general population. They have a strong measure of, in Thailand, you have strong literacy rates, so they've got literacy, perhaps even dictionary skills already in their native language.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So dictionary skills, of course, you probably didn't even need to say that. And then you can say, well, does translation have a place in a communicative language teaching setup? Yes, it does. If you have one or two difficult words in something you're trying to do, translate them. I mean, you don't just go through all kinds of gymnastics trying to get the meaning across without translation. That doesn't mean you translate everything, but certainly there is a role for translation. And the other way of dealing with difficult words is through semantic webs.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
So you have one word. What words are related to this word, and how are they related?
And words that you already know.
Words you already know.
So bird, you know, a teenage student, you could expect them to know bird. They might not know feather.
Feather, yeah.
Feather. Maybe, you know, maybe they do, maybe they not. Maybe they not.
Maybe they not.
Maybe
Very
they
good.
don't. Maybe they don't. But when you're teaching them the word feather, there are little tricks or strategies, or encourage them to even visualize these sort of semantic webs, these connections. I mean, we have research that shows that the human brain works this way, that we tend to web things together in groups, in groupings in our brain semantically. So if you can explicitly help your students employ that strategy, it might be helpful to some of them.
Right, right.
Okay, I think that's the end of it.
Yeah.
We've really enjoyed being part of your lecture and session today, and I'd like to say Khop Khun Ka to all of you. I didn't get to give a special thanks yet to Kun Sorada and Kun Manisa at the beginning, so thank you to all our dear friends in the Embassy and the Royal Thai Distance Learning Foundation for making this possible today.
And a request, Leslie and Sarah, could you repeat the homework for next time?
The homework is not on your handout. The homework will be on the website, and I will also email it to Kun Manisa and Kun Sorada and Chada and Naraporn. But the homework is to think about the TPRS. Think about the TPRS activity. Think about that analysis or profile that you did of your own students in your head. Put the two together and develop a TPRS activity that you might be willing to try. And notice we use the word try. This is an experiment in your classroom. And do it with a partner. I mean, be prepared to maybe talk with that partner and reflect on it. What worked well? What didn't work well? What surprised you? What did your partner do that you didn't do? You know, would you do it again? Why or why not, and how?
Right. But and I think the crucial thing here is try to do it using a unit from your book.
Oh, good point. Good point.
Because to help you learn how to adapt your own units, perhaps for a more communicative approach. I don't know what your books are like. Maybe they're already communicative.
Maybe
and if
they're
they
already doing this. Yeah, then you're ahead of the game.
Then you're ahead of us. Okay.
Yeah. Is that clear?
Yes, crystal clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Crystal clear. All right. All right.
Thank you very much, Sarah and Leslie. And I think we have got a lot from today's session. It's very fruitful and very interesting, and we've got a lot of ideas, new ideas. And so our big thanks from the teachers here from Bangkok side and Hua Hin side. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's our pleasure. Thank you.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Thank you. See you next time.
Bye-bye.